Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3 Iron and today we are taking a look at Magic Colors Abridged. Today we're taking a look at white magic and some of the thematic, iconic, Hallmark themes of white magic. What makes white magic white? What are some of its core identities? What are some of its weaknesses, its strengths? How does it get juxtaposed with other colors of magic and with their themes, with their goals, and with their identities? So one of the reasons why I'm doing this series is because I'm learning a whole bunch about Magic the Gathering. Thanks so much to a couple of different friends and patrons that have gotten me back into Magic after a more than 20-year hiatus. I was first introduced to Magic the Gathering back in summer camp as a kid, where a bunch of us went out and got Magic the Gathering packs. I got a blue starter pack, and I can still remember the art on one of the particular walls. It was, I don't even remember the name of the card. Maybe some of you will, so leave me a comment down below on blue walls from like the mid-90s. But anyway, today we're taking a look at white magic. I've been learning a whole bunch about it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this series was because I'm teaching my kids about magic. So kids, if you are watching this to learn a little bit more about magic, hello from Daddy. So let's jump right into the color of white magic, its theme and its sources and its background. Here's a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about white magic's core identity, its goals, its methods for achieving those goals, its passions, its detractors, the thing that potentially stand in the way of it reaching its goals, its allies, its enemies, as well as its strengths and its weaknesses. We're then going to transition and talk a little bit about cultural icons that the development team at Wizards of the Coast has used to inspire them as they think about white magic. Then we're going to talk about, is white magic the good guys of Magic the Gathering? And this is going to be some quotes from Mark Rosewater. It's a great article, and it'll be cited as well down below in the video description. So if you want to just reference that article itself, that will be, of course, included in the video description. Then we're going to talk about Hallmark mechanics of white magic. What are some of the mechanics on the cards themselves that make white magic white? And then fifthly, we're going to talk about current standard legendary creatures and planeswalkers. If it sounds a little bit like I reference a lot of things from Magic the Gathering Arena, that's because that's the environment that I'm mostly playing myself and with my kids, with my 7-year-old and my 3-year-old. My 1-year-old isn't so much into Magic right now. She's just happy with anything. But my 7-year-old and my 3-year-old are really enjoying MTGA. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up with some questions for discussion, which you can always participate in down below the video. So first off, white magic, the way of harmony. What are some of its goals? Well, white's magic's overarching goal is to help the entire world by maintaining peace. One of the ways that it goes about achieving and pursuing this goal is to inspire civilization, to obtain obedience, that's another goal, and really pushing towards a utopian community. These are some of the flavors of the goals of white magic. Wherever it's present, it's aiming for a more perfect society, perfect being defined as furthering obedience and furthering civilization. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's moral. We'll get more into that in a little bit. White magic's methods for accomplishing these goals rely on civil and moral legalism. So things like structure, order, laws, and beliefs, religious fervor, are all going to be present inside magic's white theming and white style cards. You're going to see a lot of things that provide order, that keep control of the board, that keep control of creature statuses, or simply that enforce the beliefs of white, pushing for a more utopian community. White magic's passions are to create and empower life with clear expectations. Uncertainty is not something that white appreciates. White loves civilization and seeks to build it, to construct it, to add optimism wherever it is present, to heal things that have been destroyed or can potentially be built up. Purity is another thing that white is incredibly passionate about. Purity in organization, free from corruption. Purity in politics, free from flip-flopping. Purity in law and legalism, where the moral and ethical code of conduct that white follows is very strict. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's good, but it means that it's strict. It follows a certain legalism. Their beliefs, white is very, very passionate about the things that they believe in. Chivalry is very highly sought after inside white magic's theme and identity. Self-sacrifice, you can often see different magic cards that interact with one another by protecting one another, by offering themselves up. There are several cards right now in MTGA where you can sacrifice the white card in order to protect another card inside the set, or another creature, or another artifact, or another planeswalker even. White magic's detractors, or things that stand in the way of its passions and its goals, are everything which stands in the way of establishing the structure and the utopian community that white magic is aiming for. So anything that's chaotic, absolutely stands in white magic's way. Anything that's disobedient stands in the way of white. And then thirdly, anything that creates pandemonium, anything that creates uncertainty, anything that could disrupt the status quo of white's slow, methodical, civilized building plan towards a harmonious, optimized civilization. Those are all things that stand in the way of harmony, the way of white magic. Now, white magic has got some allies and some enemies. White magic's allies on the color wheel are green and blue. That's where white is most closely aligned to. White magic finds common values of community with green. Both green and white believe that the group is more important than the individual, and you see this present in a lot of mixing mechanics between green and white, that maybe as you're playing a green and white deck, there's a lot of numbers, numberless hordes, as it were, maybe token generation, right, that represents that the group is more important than the individual. Both green and white believe that the hierarchy of nature lends itself to order. So while green really appreciates the hierarchy of nature in the cycle of life and death, growth and regrowth, white really appreciates the structure and the expectations that are inherent within inside the laws of nature. So both green and white can appreciate those laws and that hierarchy, that structure. White and blue have common values of discipline. So while green and white are together in their appreciation for laws and for the way things are, blue and white share an appreciation in their methods of achieving their goals. Blue recognizes that in order to achieve its goals, it's got to be studious. It's got to reach its full potential. And white can appreciate this because it sees full potential in building up civilization, in building up that which has maybe not reached its full potential yet, pushing towards that utopian community. So both blue and white ascribe worth to long-suffering patience and planning. Both blue and white ascribe to strategic planning, that making sure that the things and the choices that you make are something that is consistent with what long ago you were hoping to aim for, and now you are coming into the full-fledged fruition of a long thought out strategic plan. Well, the Way of Harmony has some enemies as well. Of course, red and black represent these enemies. Red is the antithesis of order. So while white is all about creating structure, creating obedience, creating a harmonious utopian community, red is like, yeah, no, we're the opposite. Red values spontaneity, which disrupts white's desire for continuity. Red values emotional expression, which disrupts white's desires for reserved restraint and measured, well thought out responses. Whereas black is an enemy of white, not so much because they're on moral opposite ends of the spectrum, but because black prioritizes the person over the people, the individual over the group. Black values of individuality conflict with white's sense of collective community. You can't have a utopian community that is all about the sum is more than the parts when black is present, because black thinks that those individual parts in and of themselves ought to take priority over the sum of them. Black's values are seen as selfish through the lens of white's we're all in this together sort of attitude. These two ends of the spectrum are not so much moral as they are decisions and processes for approaching how society does and ought to function. Well, the Way of Harmony has got some strengths. White magic's strengths lie in creating and enforcing laws, and you see this a lot of the time through gameplay in controlling the scenarios that they're involved in. White is all about creating scenarios that they have control. It's detailed in its organization. A lot of the time, White can simply foresee a problem and then plan to execute and destroy or execute and overcome whatever problem it is that it has foreseen. White provides structure wherever is possible. You see this in all of the different tribes that are present in White, whether that's clerics, whether that's knights, whether that's soldiers. If there's a group of people getting together, White is going to name it, provide leaders to it, provide middle management for it, provide people at the entry level. White is going to simply structure the heck out of whatever it is group that it's involved with. Then thirdly, White offers the individual meaning through identifying with the group. Regardless of whether you're coming in as an entry-level peon, whether you're moving up into mid-level management, or whether you're a CEO of some White tribe, it doesn't matter. White offers you as an individual meaning by identifying with the group. This is a great strength of White magic. White magic isn't without its weaknesses, though. It's slow to adapt because it's so organizationally based. So White has no answer for the unpredicted. When something comes in and creates chaos that White didn't anticipate, White is simply left sitting around, scratching its head, wondering, I guess we should plan for that better next time? White's got no answer for the unpredicted. White is resistant to progress. Progress doesn't simply mean development here. White loves developing, right? White loves constructing and building things. But White is resistant to progress that will change its goals and change its methods for achieving those goals. White sees that it's got long, strategic, well thought out plans, and so why should it change from those plans? If it stays committed to its plans, it will achieve its goals. White is very resistant to progress. White magic suppresses individualism, which often leads to the lowest common denominator sort of outcomes, where if everyone's coming in and everybody is equally important, then the slowest and worst thing that's a part of the group becomes the barometer for deciding the value of the group. Everybody matches the lowest end of the group's value rather than everybody pushing towards the highest end of the group's value. Well, magic has got some iconic influences. There are several iconic influences that can come to mind as you're thinking about the themes and the core identity of White magic. Several of these are provided. Again, thanks so much for the citations that are seen down below, which you can see. But many of these were provided by the Wizards of the Coast development team, and they've shared these generously with us as a community to get more of a feel for White magic. Leave us a comment down below, though, about what iconic influences come to your mind when you think about White magic. First off, Brienne of Tarth. So somebody that is a knight, somebody that's all about justice, somebody that's all about order. Officer James Gordon from Gotham, somebody that's all about doing his job and seeing his role fulfilled, providing order and structure to society. Tyrese from The Walking Dead, somebody who's all about defending those who can't defend others, and somebody who is, for the most part, opposed to killing, that killing is only something that we do as a result of need. King Arthur from Arthurian Legends. I know that my boy right now, he loves reading and checking in on Arthurian Legends through the Knights of Justice. And so King Arthur is a wonderful example of somebody that if they were ported into the world of magic, King Arthur would definitely be a White magic-based character. Captain Jean-Luc Picard of Star Trek The Next Generation absolutely is somebody that values structure, that values authority, that values obedience, that values the chain of command, somebody that values creating a more utopian society through creating clear expectations and harmonizing their goals. My own assertions, feel free, like I said, to add your own in the comments. One that came to mind was Colonel Nathan Jessup from A Few Good Men. So the guy that screams, "You can't handle the truth," right? So he is so committed to order and to hierarchy and to creating a more perfect world that he is willing to sacrifice the lives of others or the well-being of a few in order to hopefully benefit the whole. He sees that the whole is greater than the individual. Prince Hans of the Southern Isle from Frozen. Thanks so much to Mrs. Draconis, my wife, for helping me come up with this one. Prince Hans is somewhat devious and somewhat of a trickster, so that might fall into other colors on the magic color wheel. But Prince Hans uses the structures that are in place, marriage as well as right of ascension to the throne. He uses those things to his benefit. So Prince Hans is actually a great example of a white villain. And lastly, Lord Farquaad from Shrek. I mean, if you watch Shrek and you see Shrek and Donkey entering into Duloc, and you see the little program, right, for Duloc being the perfect place, you can see that Lord Farquaad in that wonderful, glorious, iconic moment. He says at one point during the arena that, you know, he's willing to make the sacrifice, that some of you may die to achieve his goal, but he's willing to make that sacrifice, right? That he's got goals, he's got structures, he's definitely a villain, but he's a white villain in trying to achieve his perfect utopian community. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that moral, about good versus evil, that moral dichotomy or that moral spectrum that so often comes in when we're talking about white and black in magic. These quotes are going to come from Mark Rosewater, and of course his article is linked down below. So white magic isn't just the good guys of magic, and it's not a group of harmonized harbingers of happiness. So here's the quote from Mark. It's rather extended, but stick with me. It's just such a great quote. Many humans share some global beliefs, like the taking of human life is wrong, for example. Some of white's tenets line up with some of these universal human beliefs. Therefore, white is sometimes seen as the color of good. But white is neither inherently good nor evil. White, as well as every other color in magic, will do things that can be labeled both good and evil. And even that might not be consistent from person to person. Preservation of life is very white. Most of you would probably classify that as good. Fascism is also very white. Most of you would probably classify that as evil. I mention this because I believe it's important to separate the white and black conflict from good versus evil, morality versus amorality, light versus dark, purity versus corruption. The white-black conflict takes on many shades, but good versus evil is far too subjective to use properly. Let's take one of the elements of the white and black conflict, the rights of the group versus the rights of the self. This conflict pits socialism versus capitalism. Capitalism is the black side of the argument. Is capitalism inherently evil? I don't think so, although I know there are those that would disagree with me. Mark Rosewater from 2003 in an article called The Great White Way, which you can see down below. I've added 3 cards here to this slide to typify some of the villains, and there's also a wonderful Reddit discussion that's down in the description as well on some examples of white characters who are villainous in the lore and in the history of Magic the Gathering. People who are traitorous, people who turn on their friends, people who don't necessarily value others, or maybe do show some of those signs of selfishness, but still use those signs of selfishness to further order or further a utopian community. So thinking about white magic and thinking about its place on the moral wheel is a lot different than thinking of its core identity in the color wheel of magic. White guys, white characters, and white guys can be totally villainous and bad guys inside of the world of magic. So don't think about it so much as good versus evil. Think about it more as the individual versus the self. I love that distinction. Moving on to some of the hallmark mechanics of harmony. So there are several different mechanics that are present throughout the course of the history of Magic the Gathering. Some of these are more present than others during different releases and during different sets. So here are a couple of them. First off, life gain, sometimes via the keyword lifelink, which gives life for damage dealt. Second, damage prevention, stopping damage from being dealt entirely. Third, protection from colors, providing hexproof against specific colors. Knight of Grace, that's displayed right above me here, provides hexproof from black. Vigilance, which is a keyword that causes your attacking creature to not tap. Pretty cool. It keeps your defender or keeps your creature available for defending, representing that well-structured, well-meant, well-trained soldier aspect that simply going forward to attack doesn't leave you vulnerable in defense. Fifthly, combat-specific abilities. This fits specifically in with White's theme of the tribes of knights and soldiers, that not only are White's troops incredibly well-trained in combat themselves, that a lot of soldiers and knights have got combat abilities on their cards, but that also there are a lot of instants that come into play, or enchantments that come into play, that are specifically relevant for combat. Sixthly, enchantments. Speaking of enchantments, both proactive playing of enchantments and proactively removing or reactively removing enchantments is a huge mechanic in terms of White. And I believe the quote from Wizards of the Coast is that White has got the single most enchantment removal and single greatest number of enchantments across the board throughout the history of Magic. Seventh, boosts to toughness. So not boosts to their power or to the damage that a creature will do, but boosts to its health or to its survivability or to its ability to come out on top and remain available for the next fight. Have you ever heard that phrase, the best ability is availability? Well, that's very, very true when it comes to White's sense of defense and White's mentality entering into combat. Eighth are creature tokens. These are represented in White with 1/1 soldiers, 2/2 cats, and 4/4 angels. Ninth is exiling cards. White has the most cards of any color that remove cards from the game using the keyword or the term exiling, which doesn't simply put the card from combat into a discard pile or graveyard. It removes the card entirely from the game and makes it otherwise ineligible for play. And 10th and finally, board wipe. White is well known in its mechanics for removing creatures and permanents, enchantments, artifacts, en masse, wholly as a group. White will simply wipe the entire board, whether that's filled with creatures or filled with other things. White excels at making the board clean and starting afresh, building towards that utopian community. Well, White has currently right now some very awesome legendary creatures and planeswalkers available through Magic the Gathering Arena. So we're going to walk through a couple of those really quick. Ajani is here, and he is represented in 2 different forms. Bard, Steward of Argive. Man, I'm going to butcher some of these names. He's really awesome. Danitha, Capuchin, the Paragon. She's awesome. She's got First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. That's an incredible amount. I mean, when you look at the mechanics that make White White, she's got First Strike, which is a combat ability. She's got Vigilance, which allows her to remain defensive even though she's attacking. And she's got Lifelink, which represents healing and protection. Like, she is so iconic when it comes to so many different mechanics. I feel like almost all of these 10 different mechanics of White are just thrown onto her. She just feels like she's tightly packed together with a bunch of core identifying White mechanics. Moving on. Evra, the Halcyon Witness, can swap her power with your life total, which is ridiculous if you've got a massive life total and then you swap with her and then she swings in and blows something up. So she gives you value and, again, interaction for life gain, rewarding you for healing yourself and building up your own life pool. Quende, the Pride of Femeref. Lena, the Selfless Champion. And Lyra Dawnbringer, of course, being the glorious, awesome, just board-clearing angel that she is. She is so tough to deal with. Mavrin Fane, the Dusk Apostle. Shalai, the Voice of Plenty, which gives protection to you as well as to other creatures. She basically comes onto the board and values herself as a self-sacrificial protector. She says, you've got to deal with me before you can deal with the rest of the game. Teshar, the Ancestors Apostle, and Zatalpa, the Primal Dawn. Just some massive freaking creature that can do everything. Flying, Double Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible. Well, what appeals to you about White Magic? What stands out to you? What inspires you about White Magic? When you're in a mood to play as a White deck, or when you're thinking about Magic, or when you're thinking about building a character, maybe in D&D or in another game, what about White Magic and its iconic characters and its iconic themes inspire you into a White mood? What do you despise about White Magic? What cards come down and you just go, ah, that's so frustrating. Why did you do that? I know for me, when I'm playing anything that's creature dependent, when I see my opponent leave open 5 mana with 2 untapped white mana, I'm like, oh man, here comes Cleansing Nova. There go all my fun enchantments I've been building towards all game. There goes all my creatures that I've been building. It's just gone. It's all gone. There it goes, Cleansing Nova. Settle the wreckage. Why did I attack into that? What do you despise about White Magic? And then thirdly, who do you see as iconic figures representing white magic's values and iconic themes? Who comes to your mind? Leave us a comment down below and join the discussion as we chat about white magic. Here are some citations and some links. All of these will be provided down below in the video description. Thanks so much once again to all of our Patreon supporters and subscribers to the G3 fam. Kids, if you're watching, I'm glad you guys watched, and I'm glad you guys are interested in Magic, and I'm having a blast teaching you and playing with you. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching, and I hope that today is the day that white magic doesn't ruin your arena run.